Hi, I'm Bill Arnold. Thank you for listening to this podcast. There are many more podcasts available at myfaithradio.com. Your support makes this possible. Thank you. Okay, it's time to begin. Let's start a countdown. 20, 19, 18, 17. I just start the song.
Oh, don't you know, it's the Bill Arnold Show. It's Bill.
And a warm welcome to the Bill Arnold Show. Thank you for joining today. I hope you had a wonderful day. If you're in the car heading home, I hope work went well. And I'm always glad that I can be in the car with you, or maybe you're home making dinner and getting things ready. It's always nice to have you on board listening to the show. I've got a great guest. Dr. Brian Warren's going to join the program in just a minute. We're going to talk about the topic of abortion today. It's obviously a very polarizing issue, and there are a couple of sides that they accuse each other of deceit and manipulation and all kinds of things. It's a very hotly debated topic. And then there's terms like reproductive health care and things that make Christians a little nauseous, actually, because we're talking about ending a human life. And Brian has written a book. He's not only an MD, he's an anesthesiologist, but he's also got his degree in Master's in Divinity. And he's written a book called The Truth of the Trade, addressing the deceit and seduction surrounding abortion. Now, I want to make this an open conversation. If you've got a question or comment, I would really love to be able to present Brian with whatever you have on your hearts and minds today, because we've got a great resource here with us today, and let's take full advantage of his expertise, and I think you will enjoy the hour. So whatever question you have about it, 877-933-2484. Brian, so nice to have you back on the show.
Bill, I can't thank you enough for letting me be back on your show. It was just so great being a part of it last time, and you're such an amazing host that I've been looking forward to this with great expectation. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. I love flattery every now and then. I try to get a little bit from Wyatt every day.
Just a little bit.
Just a little.
We're working on it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So let's start by just framing the conversation about what God has to say about the totality of abortion.
Well, first of all, you mentioned, recruiting the guest, the listeners.
Oh, yeah.
In this conversation.
Yep.
So I want to personally encourage people to pepper us with questions or comments. I'd love to hear it and hear your thoughts and share with you. And what does God have to say in totality of abortion? Well, we could simply boil it right down to Exodus 20:13, thou shalt not murder.
Amen.
And then we can go from there and back it out to how God reveals himself. And he reveals himself to us, his created beings, through his written word, scripture, as well as through his creation. Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God. So then we can pack both his revelation, both creation and science, because that's how we discover his creation. We explore his creation through science. That's the interpretation of creation. And then we can also explore his written word through through theology and examining what God has to say to try to understand the mind of God through his written word. And if we do the two together, and I've just happened to be blessed with this, 27 years plus as a practicing anesthesiologist in a very large tertiary care trauma center. So I see death and destruction all the time. But I also was called to seminary 6-7 years ago and completed a Master of Divinity. So I feel somewhat equipped to speak to both ends of God's revelation. And I just assure the listener that God speaks in totality to the issue of abortion, an issue that I can think of has no greater singular importance that our culture is faced with. There is nothing like it. It is unmatchable. And he speaks with a very loud roar of a lion, the lion that he is, the Lion of Judah, that abortion is murder. and he reveals that to us through his creation and science, as well as his written word. And his written word, some Christians say, well, he doesn't speak to abortion. Well, I think over the next little bit, we're going to hopefully get to explore that and share and learn from each other how he does that.
Mm-hmm. Brian, is language, that's always going to be a battlefield. And one side will call the fetus a baby or a child, and the other side will call it an embryo or pregnancy tissue or something. But there's always going to be a battle over language, isn't there?
Well, if you want to change the rules and you want to change, have we seen through history that if you want to change things for people, they'll first start with changing the language. And so yes, they'll call a fetus and say it's not a baby, or say, it's a human, but it's not a person. So they'll get into the issue of personhood as well. But it's always a change of the language. And I happen to think the perfect term for this whole entire thing, the totality of abortion, is genocide. And genocide on a scale that the world has never known. My wife and I, this past spring, took a visit to Oxfam, Poland, where is the home of Auschwitz I and Auschwitz II Birkenau.
Mm-hmm.
And standing in the gas chamber and looking up at the holes where the gas canisters were poured down, and then looking at the ovens, I got a glimpse of genocide. And then walking by a room, an operating room sometime thereafter, where abortion was taking place on a baby who was deemed not perfect, let's say a Down syndrome baby, and I could do nothing about it. It was the same feeling and it was the same place. So what did Hitler do? Well, when we were in one of the barracks in Auschwitz I, they were playing a video, and then one of the barracks that's restored to be a museum, if you will. And the video showed Hitler speaking to a mass gathering of perhaps tens of thousands of Germans. And he was labeling them, and he labeled the Jews parasites. And the camera panned to this one woman in particular, and she was just cheering wildly, this huge grin on her face as he called the Jews parasites. And then we have my son-in-law is in his senior year of medical school. In his sophomore year, in his second year of medical school, one of his professors teaching gynecology and obstetrics referred to the baby in the womb as a parasite. So, of course, you have to change the language if you want to have it your way and use life as you see fit. It's always been that way. And the same is true, just as you mentioned, Bill, the term fetus versus the term baby. Oh, it's not a baby, it's a fetus. Well, fetus in the Latin actually means giving birth or offspring. So that term itself doesn't even mean baby, if you will. So so that it doesn't apply. It's just a convenient use of language, Bill.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Brian Warren is my guest. His book is called The Truth of the Trade, Addressing the Deceit and Seduction Surrounding Abortion. If you have a question, right now would be the best time to send it over on the text line, 877-933-2484. Again, 877-933-2484. Brian, just to get things started a little bit for listeners, maybe you could share one of the powerful stories from the book of life in the hospital.
Well, sure. Here's what abortion looks like in real life. Okay, so we have this explosion of the use of the abortion pill. And since the pandemic, if you will, 5 years ago, the use of the abortion pill has exploded, and it's now crossing state lines without a prescription, without a doctor's order. It's untraceable. It arrives in the mail in a brown package, and so people, even if a state thinks that they're limiting abortion, let's just say Texas, for instance, they're not limiting it at all because abortion's coming through the mail. So what does the abortion pill do? It's supposed to be taken in the first 10 weeks of pregnancy. The reason is if it's taken in 11 or 12 weeks when the baby's bigger, then that home abortion that occurs with a woman sitting on the toilet expelling the baby, the baby's too big and causes complications. And so, but we see complications all the time, and it's really increased with the use of the abortion pill of bleeding and infection complications. So there was one particular morning last year, maybe a year and a half ago, I arrive at 7 in the morning to take over the operating rooms and take charge as the anesthesiologist of the day. And the night doctor, one of my partners, says, "Hey, we just started a young 21-year-old. She's back in room, you know, let's call it 3, and and she's having a DNC, and it's going okay in there." So I'm like, "Oh, DNC, nighttime, probably a complication from the abortion pill." So I go to get changed. I'm heading to the locker room, and I hear overhead a loud blare over the speaker. Run to the blood bank for room 3, blood bank retrieval for room 3. They're calling overhead for staff to go retrieve blood products for transfusion, massive transfusion. I was like, uh-oh, that's a problem. I hustle into the room, and what do I see? But there's the OBGY, there's the young 21-year-old asleep on the table, and there's the obstetrician with his arm buried up into the woman's uterus, as he's covered in blood, blood's covering the floor, and he says, "I can't stop the bleeding. It's become uncontrolled." And I start to work with the nurse anesthetist. We work together. The blood slides through the door. We're pouring blood into this woman. Her blood pressure's in the 60s, and we're trying to resuscitate her with drugs and blood to keep her alive. And the obstetrician has a balloon now in the uterus to try to stop the bleeding. And now her blood is turned to Kool-Aid, and it's not clotting. And it's evident that what's called disseminated intravascular coagulation, DIC, is set in. So her blood is not clotting because the hemorrhage in the uterus is so severe, and uterine hemorrhage can cause this clotting disorder. And so now she's not she's not clotting her blood. We're, quote, losing her, but we're working diligently to try to save her. And eventually, after giving her enough blood products and plasma with clotting factors, we're able to get her stabilized, if you will. But what's evident is she's starting to go into multi-organ failure. Her lungs are failing as she's not saturating. The urine output is dropping as her kidneys are shutting down because of the DIC. And sure enough, that woman had taken the abortion pill, and she's having a bleeding complication. So now we take her to the intensive care unit. We have to keep her on the breathing machine. We have to keep drugs going to keep her blood pressure elevated. And so she's on full total life support. So days before, let's just say a week before, there were 2 lives, one life dependent on the other. And now there's only one person alive, and that person's life is now dependent on us. So we take her off to the intensive care unit. She did survive and got out of the hospital days later. She was young and otherwise healthy, and she recovered from that multi-organ failure in that event. But that's what it looks like in real life. To see a woman at 3 in the morning who has an infection because there's an arm or a leg left in her uterus from an incomplete abortion, and now she comes in to have a DNC to clear the infection. That's what it looks like in real life.
Wow. I'm usually not out of words like this, but right now I am. So fortunately, we're up against a break. So I'm going to take a short break and be right back with Dr. Brian Warren as we discuss this difficult topic of abortion today. If you have a question, Brian is not only an anesthesiologist and a physician, but he's a theologian. And we're talking about all of the implications today. And if you have a question, send it over on the text line, 877-933-2484. We'll be right back with Brian. It is my deepest desire that you take the very first step of faith by placing your faith and trust in Jesus Christ. If you've got questions about what it means to begin a relationship with Jesus, text the word faith to 41224. My guest today is Dr. Brian Warren. First question that came in, Brian, was could you ask Dr. Warren what the hospital does with the body parts after a DNC?
Well, that's a great question. And boy, is it profound, the answer. And that is after a D&C, which is an abortion in the first trimester. And understand a D&C is also the same procedure that's done for miscarriages. So in a miscarriage, you have a baby that's passed away, and 25% of all babies that are conceived actually don't live to term. They suffer a miscarriage. Another 25% of all babies are aborted. And then the other 50% get to be delivered alive. But during a D&C for an abortion or a D&E, which is for a second or third trimester abortion, the body parts have to be counted because the pathologist has to see to it that all the body parts have been taken out because a leftover thorax or a leftover, or if the head's left in or a leg is left in, that becomes a source of infection or bleeding. And so they have to count and verify that the parts are in. And then, of course, it becomes medical waste, and medical waste incinerated, disposed of with the rest of the medical waste. Aborted babies are certainly don't receive a funeral or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that answer to that sensitive question. All right, Brian, let's look at life through the lens of creation, because this is so amazing. And right now we're getting closer to Christmas as we think of Mary giving birth to Jesus, and the whole idea of creation and the miracle birth of a baby is just remarkable.
Right, right. So science views a living being as and says something is alive and living when it metabolizes, grows, reproduces, responds to irritable stimuli, moves, has complex functional structures, and has heritable variability, meaning it produces offspring that are different than the parents thanks to genetics.
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, the being dies. That defines life. And so interestingly, a poll of 5,000 scientists, biologists from around the world at 1,000 universities revealed that 96% of all biologists say that life begins at conception. But these same ones in that survey later revealed that because of the nature of several follow-up questions, that they had been kind of tricked into tacitly disapproving of abortion. But nevertheless, scientists say life begins at conception because that single cell, that unique brand new cell with unique, never been made genetics, is a living being at one cell, and it's unmistakable.
And the information that consists in those cells in the womb, and they're just hours old. They're complete, aren't they?
Well, a thing is whatever a thing is what it will become.
Okay.
Right? So that cell will become a person just like me and you
Mm-hmm.
when it goes through all the stages of development. So the thing that it is the thing that it is at one cell. It's fully a human. And so that's to say, well, if it's too small to be a human, it's one cell. Well, then should we say the toddler who's not as big as the adult doesn't have the same value, and so therefore it's okay to kill the toddler because it's smaller than the adult? Of course not. But that's the argument people say when it's one cell and it's so tiny. But it's a uniquely made individual, never been made before, with its own unique genetic makeup. And it undergoes explosive reproduction, and reproduction of cells and multiplication, so that by 2 weeks, that tiny little baby that doesn't look like it does at 8 weeks, because at 8 weeks, 6 weeks past a woman's missed period, at 8 weeks, you have your arms and legs and fingers and toes and a head and eyes and ears. You have all your organs because you've gone through the period of what's called organogenesis from weeks 3 to 8. You look exactly like the little person that you see in the crib. It's just you're much smaller. And you too, at 8 weeks, have a disproportionately large head. But so does a baby has a disproportionately large head. Um, but at 2 weeks, that little tiny baby, that little embryo, that looks different than it does at 8 weeks, has cells in it. And you talked about the genetics, Bill, and the genetics are amazing. And we, of course, we dig all deep into this stuff in the book. But nevertheless, at 2 weeks, there are, and we talk about chromosomes, all the cells in that little body have two strands of DNA times 23. They are called diploid cells from a genetic standpoint. But then there's a group of cells that are sitting in the groin region at 2 weeks when a mother may not even know, Bill, that she's pregnant. And they're in the groin region and they're a haploid number. They only have 23 strands of DNA. What are these cells? These are the primordial germ cells that give rise to sperm and eggs that will produce that mother's grandchildren at 2 weeks. So you
All right.
at 2 weeks, and
Oh,
the
come
mother
on.
may not even know she's pregnant. But there are the germ cells producing sperm and eggs that will form that mother's grandchildren. That daughter inside her has cells in her which will give rise to that mother who may be thinking about abortion, her granddaughter. The cells are already present at 2 weeks. It's incredible.
That's
So
amazing.
you mentioned at the beginning of the show, your opening remarks, Bill, were wonderful, and it was reproductive health care, reproductive rights. Well, the question I would then turn around and ask all 350 million Americans is, whose reproductive rights are we talking about? Are we talking about the reproductive rights of that woman who might go ahead and mail order the abortion pills? Or are we talking about the reproductive rights of the daughter inside her? Or are we talking about that woman's future granddaughter?
Wow.
Whose reproductive rights are we talking about when
Exactly.
she may not even know she's pregnant? It's only 2 weeks.
Oh, my goodness. You know, Brian, this is it reframes the Psalm 139 verse about being fearfully and wonderfully made.
Oh my gosh, right?
Mm-hmm.
When none of your days were known, not one of them, but the Lord knew every one of them. Yeah, that's a powerful passage. You saw my unformed substance, he says, God says.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So talk, if you would, about just the uniqueness of every baby in the womb and all of the unique qualities that God gives each person. That's kind of a vague question, but I know I know you can handle it.
I don't know. It is a little vague, but that's good.
Well, we
You
all
know,
have our own fingerprints, and I think aren't all of our eyes completely different? I mean, we can every
yeah.
every eye is different, every fingerprint is different, and just you think about how different we all are, yet we're all so much alike.
Well, we explore this a little bit, but when that baby's being made and he sees our unformed substance when he was intricately weaving us in the womb, as God says in Psalm 139, the um the 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 germ layers, the mesoderm, ectoderm, and endoderm, these that are initially, just present at 2 weeks, and they're starting to interact with each other. And there's all this genetic signaling that I had to go back for my thesis. I did my thesis in seminary on called Abortion and the Culture of Life. And so I did a deep dive, of course, and I had to go back and I took two brand new recent medical textbooks on medical embryology, and I read them to feed that paper, which ultimately turned into this book. But nevertheless, I'm reading all this embryology, and I had embryology as a medical student 35 years ago, and as well as a biology student as an undergrad. But nevertheless, the explosion in research is ridiculous. And there's all this cellular signaling where the cells are talking to each other, signaling through the genetics
Oh boy.
and telling what cell to go where, and when it gets there, what it's going to be. And so, yes, everybody's different genetically. So everybody's cell signaling is different and unique to only them. So at 4 weeks, for instance, Bill, for an illustration, at 4 weeks, so the mother's just like, I think I probably am pregnant because it's 2 weeks past my I've missed a period for now 2 weeks. I've had a first pregnancy test. Let me go get another one. So at that point, there's already the eyes are forming. And the eyes, of course, have the optic nerves, and then they're part of your cranial nerves, and they attach from the back of your eyes to the back of your brain. And that's where vision occurs in the posterior cerebral cortex. Those nerves, those optic nerves, traversing through your skull, through your head, to the back of your brain, are already present at 4 weeks. And they stay in that location, Bill, for the rest of your life, allowing you to see. They don't move. And they're the same nerves. So when you were 4 weeks in the womb, those nerve cells, remember, nerve cells don't regenerate. Those are the same nerves allowing you to see that we're present at 4 weeks. At
Wow.
7 weeks, at
Wow.
7 weeks, the nerves are connecting have already connected from your ear to your hearing center in your brain. And those nerves, Bill, are now sensing the developed in the cochlea, right in the middle ear, allows you to hear. There's hair cells. The hair cells are already formed at 7 weeks. Those hair cells are already functioning, sending electrical signals to your brain. So at 7 weeks, you're not even going to be born, remember, for what is that? 33 weeks, right?
Hmm.
You're not. So at 7 weeks, you can already hear your mom's voice. You're not going to remember it, right?
Yeah.
But nevertheless, sound signals are already being sent at
Wow.
7 weeks through those nerves.
That actually kind of chokes me up.
So you're
That's
supposed to talk to your baby in the
so
womb, and
beautiful.
right, and a mother and a father can
Yeah.
sit there and they talk to their baby, and
They
they're like, well, I
should.
don't know if the baby's listening. They should, because the
Yeah.
baby's listening.
Yeah.
Yes, amen.
Yeah. And a fetal heartbeat. You're detecting that at what, 6 weeks?
Mm.
And
What?
does that sound about right? Is it around 6 weeks?
Well, we're detecting it you can detect it at 6 weeks, but like when I was in medical school 30 years ago, you couldn't detect ultrasound technology wasn't developed where you could listen to the sounds of the heart at 6 weeks. It was much later, but
Yeah.
ultrasound technology is advanced, and it's going to continue advance because science continues to advance, does it not?
Yeah.
Well, nevertheless, no, but as you know, the heart is beating at 3 weeks, at 21 days,
Wow.
1 week after those. Remember the germ cells already present,
Yeah. Right.
the granddaughter cells, right? 1 week after that, the heart's already beating. And it's just that ultrasound technology doesn't allow us to detect it. And so when we say we have we're going to have a heartbeat bill here in the state of, let's just pretend it's Louisiana, we have a heartbeat bill. So you can't do abortions, or in Florida, can't do abortions after the heartbeats at 6 weeks. But that's a lie. And so you've rooted your law in a lie because the heart's beating at 3 weeks. And then
Hmm.
what you're doing, Bill, and here's crazy, and this is for maybe another time or part of the show. But when you do that and you make a heartbeat bill because you bring up the heartbeat, you're teaching people that it's okay to murder up until the heartbeats. But after the heartbeats, it's not okay to murder. So you're training people through law, because law is a tutor. Law trains us to act righteously. And you're teaching them that it's okay to murder with your heartbeat bill.
Hmm. That's troubling.
It is. That's why it's got to be no abortion at 1 cell.
Yeah.
Anything else is a compromise with evil.
Yeah. And then when you perform an abortion, aren't you effectively stopping a beating heart?
Oh boy. Absolutely. So the
Yeah.
abortion pill itself, the first drug in the abortion pill stops the ability for progesterone to maintain the pregnancy. So that placenta and the umbilical cord attached to the placenta is detached from the uterine wall because you've stopped the prostate, stopped progesterone from working. So, yes, the heart's beating, but only for a time, because now you've cut off the oxygen supply. So you've basically suffocated the baby in the womb. And then the second pill expels the baby a couple of days later, because drugs are used to, quote, contract the uterus, kind of like it's the same drug we use in the hospital all the time, Cytotec, that the obstetricians use to ripen the cervix and get the uterus ready for contractions, and enhances the ability of oxytocin, pitocin to contract the uterus. Same drug sent in the mail that ejects the baby, expels the baby through uterine contractions. And then let's say you bring up such an amazing point about the heart. I mean, it's really all about the heart, and it's all about God's heart, because the conclusion is through God's heart, his mercy and his grace, he loves us and he can forgive us no matter what we do, even the sin of abortion. But here's the abortionist taking a second or third trimester patient, because they actually can be patients in the womb, but he's taken that little baby and the mother back to the operating room, and that baby's heart is beating, but he can't do a DNC and just use suction and have the legs and the arms come apart very, really easily through the suction machine. Now the baby's too tough, right? So he has to break off the arms and the legs and pull them individually
Mm.
out through the cervix. But he doesn't want to risk pulling the whole baby out because it happens. And if he does, and the heart's beating, the baby's now wiggling in front of everybody. And that's too much that's to people's surprise, and they don't want to see that, right? They want to pretend they're not murdering.
Yeah.
So what the OB does instead is he uses ultrasound, same thing that's used to listen to the heartbeat. He envisions the heart through the ultrasound technology, can see the heart, and then places a needle into the heart and injects potassium to stop the heart beating so they don't have to risk delivering a live baby. And then what do you do with the live baby? Well, we know what they do with the live baby. Gosnell in Philadelphia
Yeah.
did it lots of times. And so they have to stop the heart.
Yeah, it's a very hard conversation to be having, and the whole evil behind it just makes me crazy. So
I know.
yeah,
But it's the truth. But it's all the truth.
it is the truth, Brian.
And if we're not going to share the truth, what are we doing as Christians if we won't speak truth into our dying culture?
And I'm probably pretty sure to say that there's somebody listening today that is just found out they're pregnant and they're a little panicked. So this is a great conversation. So if you have a question for Dr. Warren, let me know what it is. You can text it over to 877-933-2484. We're talking about abortion today. He's written a book called The Truth of the Trade, Addressing the Deceit and Seduction Surrounding Abortion. It's certainly a topic that divides our society. And if you, again, have a question, you can send it over on the text line, 877-933-2484. And we'll be right back with Brian. So glad to have Dr. Brian Warren as my guest. He's written a book called The Truth of the Trade, Addressing the Deceit and Seduction Surrounding Abortion. Obviously a very difficult topic. Brian, when I sometimes look at Planned Parenthood information, they rarely or ever use abortion. They'll talk about it as abortion care or an in-clinic procedure. And I think, boy, there's more deceptive language, isn't it?
That's right. Like you started off the show with reproductive health care.
Yeah.
It's just deceptive. And as Planned Parenthood puts on their website when discussing the abortion pill, they quote say it's no less safe than, to quote Planned Parenthood, than Viagra or Tylenol.
Wow. That's unbelievable.
It is unbelievable, especially with what I see in the hospital and the complications. They're just wrong. And no less safe for the mother in their view, but it's 100% unsafe for the baby, right?
Yeah.
So, but there is an abortion reversal pill. And there's states and organizations that are, making available the abortion reversal pill, which is simply a very, very high. That's actually just very, very high dose concentrated progesterone. So it overcomes that competitive inhibition of the drug mifepristone, which blocks the progesterone. You overwhelming those receptors with a significant amount of progesterone to keep that pregnancy going until that mifepristone is metabolized and gone from the body. So that's how you can spare the baby. So if a woman takes the abortion pill, the first step, and she then realizes and has regret, because I think all of these women actually do have some degree of regret. They certainly have that was a misspeak, a debt to pay.
Mm-hmm.
But Jesus paid that debt on the cross 2,000 years ago for our sins, including the sin of abortion. The debt has been paid. But if she realizes that mistake, she can, within a couple of days, get a hold of that reversal pill and take it and save the baby. And it works, I think, about it's hard to study, right? But estimates are maybe 66% of the time saving the baby, maybe 50 some percent, but it is useful.
Mm-hmm. I know there is a lot about if you've had an abortion, there's a lot of things that you have to deal with as a result for maybe the rest of your life.
Yeah. There's this story of this woman who at age 18, and I saw her testimony, at age 18, she had an abortion. And then at age 36, she's now then married and she wants to have children, her and her husband, but they can't have children. And so they're going through the adoption process. Well, as she talked about, for those 20 years, whenever she would go to church, and she would, and now remember, 20% of all women who have an abortion say they attend church almost weekly. Nevertheless, when she would go to a church and sit there in the pew and look up at the cross, all that woman could see was her baby nailed to the cross.
Hmm.
And she would think, how could a God, the creator of all things, the, the creator of the very breath that I breathe, forgive me for what I've done? But then going through the process of adoption with her husband, she learned that she too could be an adopted daughter of the living king. And she then realized the forgiveness which she so desperately sought. Crisis pregnancy centers around the country have post-abortion care programs to provide, the therapy and the counseling. And they're obviously Christian centers, so the only forgiveness that we can have is that found through Jesus and his substitutionary atonement. And they make the woman aware of this and counsel the woman and walk alongside her while she recovers from having that abortion. Women who have had an abortion versus those that had their children and gave live births. For those that have had an abortion, Bill, there is a 270% increase in suicide risk.
Hmm.
Abortion is crushing to women, and 25% of all women in the United States have had an abortion. We all know people who have had one, but people won't speak of it. 20% of all men, Bill, have been a part of an abortion. And yet people don't want to talk about it. They bury it. And I think ultimately, and I don't know the mind of these unfortunate people, but I think all too often it hardens their heart and they know what they've done in sight of the Lord, because we all know, we all know the law, and therefore we know there is a God, even though we might want to reject it. I think it causes people to shake an angry fist at God and saying, you're not God. And in their own mind, by taking a life, they've made themselves to be a God. But in other words, I think they reject coming to faith because of whether the perception of how this God could love them for what they've done, not realizing that all sin is forgivable, or just a further hardened heart, which is just really sad. And it's really the thesis of the book, Bill, and my message. And my message is one of hope. And it's the hope of that we can all be forgiven no matter what we've done. The penal substitutionary atonement of Christ is real. He can trade a life for a life, and he did. His son's life for your eternal life. A parent cannot trade their child's life for them to have a perception of a better life. Only God can do it, and he did it. And it's to share the gospel through the issue of abortion. And my hope is, and really the thesis of the book is, and my target audience for the book is the pastoral leadership, pastors and elders, how to share, if you read it, and how to share the gospel through the issue of sin, and in this case, the sin of abortion. If 20% of all women are attending weekly and 70% of women who have had their first abortion call themselves Christian, but they go ahead and have an abortion anyway, to the tune of over 1 million a year in this country, or 3 billion abortions worldwide in the last 50 years, obviously the church is really, really missing the mark.
Brian, I have to give a lot of credit to a lot of pro-life centers around the country. I think they're doing fantastic work. I know a couple personally in my hometown, and the way they pour into the lives of these confused young women that come in that are contemplating an abortion, and the ways in which they can help them have their baby is just so powerful, so remarkable. I think they're all worthy of supporting.
Absolutely. If you're looking to where to place your time and efforts as you try to do something about what God abhors, and that's abortion, then yes, a great place is to pour your resources into crisis pregnancy centers that come alongside these women and speak truth, or to pro-life outfits that will go and pray in front of abortion centers, or those that will lobby and support stopping abortion at one cell, not allowing it at when pain is felt, not allowing it at 15 weeks, not allowing it when a heart beats, but at one cell, because everything else is a lie, and we're not to be part of a lie. But yes, come along crisis pregnancy centers. And the other one, Bill, is special needs centers. I mean, I see these abortions taking place in large hospitals, and these are the ones that are second and third trimester, and these are the ones that are too difficult, too complex to take place in a Planned Parenthood. Requires general anesthesia. And that's where anesthesiologists come in, and that's why I'm exposed to it. Even though I've never participated in one, I always turn them away. Um, but they're too complicated to take care of in the Planned Parenthood. They come to the hospital because the baby's been diagnosed with, let's just say, Down syndrome. Well, I think it's Norway is claim to fame now is they've eliminated Down syndrome.
Hmm.
Well, how do they do that? They killed them all.
Wow. Oh.
So come alongside special needs centers, making it easier for the family to care for a child that has special needs. That's another great place to pour one's resources and efforts.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Brian, when you are talking to colleagues at work, I'm not asking you to tell me what all the other doctors think and feel, but are your values and what you believe about this topic, or do you have support at the hospital among other doctors and physicians?
Well, it was recent that at one of the hospitals, they also do transgender surgeries as well as abortions. And I don't participate in those either. The
Okay.
mastectomies for these very unfortunate, very confused, psychiatrically disabled women who think that they're now going to have some degree of peace because they have bilateral mastectomies. And I refuse to do those either. Well, there was a recent example of where I said, I'm not taking care of the patient. It's time for my partner to leave, and I'm supposed to have the long shift, if you will, Bill. But there's one of these mastectomies going on. And he says, I don't guess you're going to take that, are you? Most doctors are pagans. They mostly are. And and he says, you're not going to take that, I don't guess, because it was going to come to me earlier and I refused to care for the patient. So somebody else got the case. And I said, no, I'm not going to take that. He goes, I guess you're going to make me stay late and cover the anesthesia for this operation, aren't you? I said, unfortunately, that's the choice that you've made. And well, he got very angry. And I just told him, hey, I want you to know, first of all, that Jesus loves you.
Wow.
Well, the word Jesus it's never mentioned amongst doctors. But that was an opportunity to share the gospel. And long story short, we went back and forth over the following 45 minutes as he was hoping to leave for the day and he was stuck. He said, well, it's not like they're back there murdering a baby. And yet he participates in those abortions. So he knows right and wrong. He knows what he's doing. And he even contrasted it with, as he said, the murder of a baby. And so they know what they're doing. They all went to medical school. They know when life begins. They know what a baby looks like. And as anesthesiologist, you're around babies a lot up in labor and delivery. And you see life come into the world and you see a lot of, crazy stories too. And but it's a beautiful thing. So, right? You're a part of it. And but they reject the truth, and it's a changing of the language, kind of like we started off our talk with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. Brian Warren is my guest. You can learn more about him at Brian Warren, WARREN, MD-IV.com. We'll take a break and be right back. We carry each other's burdens. Please know you can bring us your prayer concerns and we will pray. Share your prayer requests with the Faith Radio team by texting or calling 877-933-2484 or share your prayer requests with the Faith Radio staff and listeners at myfaithradio.com. Welcome to the show. Dr. Brian Warren is my guest. We're talking about abortion, which is not a very easy topic to discuss, but he's written a book called The Truth of the Trade, addressing the deceit and seduction surrounding abortion. And Brian is not only an anesthesiologist, MD, but he's also got his degree, his MDiv. So he loves to have that intersection of science and medicine and theology. And we still maybe have time for one more question. If you want to text it over 877-933-2484. Again, 877-933-2484. Brian, the whole discussion on this is it is such an important topic. Wyatt and I were talking during the break how it's so important to tell the truth, as uncomfortable as it is. And there is so many hurting people. There is so many people, women who have had abortions that are still living with grief and pain and suffering as a result of a decision they made 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Right. And it's that pain and suffering for these women that when I was writing the book and I was reflecting on different stories that sometimes caused me to pause and just shed tears
Yeah.
for these lost and hurting people. And I could envision them and I would be, digging into what God has to say and his forgiveness and his mercy. And then juxtaposing that with the profound truth and the profound reality that we've been lied to and deceived from the great deceiver into thinking differently. And it just breaks my heart. And it breaks my heart like that one woman who wouldn't come to faith because of her perception of what she did. And but she doesn't know God and his good grace and his amazing mercy. Mercy is being forgiven, is being, is not receiving what you do deserve. And grace is receiving what you don't deserve. And people just don't get to hear that from the pulpit. And if I have any real, I have a passion for this issue, obviously, but my passion is also manifested in a desire to speak to those that are in the pulpit and for them to boldly take this issue on, to speak to the hurting woman in the pew, to speak to the hurting father, because you maybe have seen videos of fathers that their significant other, the woman is at the Planned Parenthood, and he's begging her, please don't do it. Please don't do it. And he's sobbing in tears. And I've seen a number of these videos, and it breaks your heart. And these people carry that pain their entire life. And it's just not necessary. And I think that it's the pulpit that could really make the most significant impact on this, because from the pulpit, you get the church, or said a different way, government flows downhill from the culture. Culture flows downhill from the church. Church flows downhill from the pulpit. And if you have a compromised pulpit, a pulpit unwilling to speak the full truth of the gospel, combined with the grace of Jesus Christ at the same exact time, chaos ensues. And then the government codifies it. And that's on the pastor. That's on the pulpit. And those are who we need to, I believe, call to account. Because as it says in James 3:1, and God speaks to teachers being held to a higher account. Pastors, you're held to the highest account. Where are you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very important, and I hope you have opportunities to encourage and have inroads with pastors that can speak as boldly and clearly as you have done today, Brian. This has really been quite an hour.
Well, I've enjoyed it thoroughly, and I could do hours more. There's nothing that I think is more important to talk about.
Yeah. Well, I certainly wish you and your family a very Merry Christmas. Thank you for spending time with us today. Your book is great, and I know for people who are passionate about this topic, and there's a lot of people that support pro-life and want to do whatever they can, this is a great read. So thank you once again for doing the show. We'll do it again in January.
That sounds great. And Merry Christmas to all. And we'll leave them on this note. Luke chapter 1 in the incarnation, just like Jesus was fully a person at one cell, so were you. And if we can't abort Jesus, we can't abort you. And that's a Merry Christmas, and as it relates to the incarnation of Jesus Christ that we're all going to be celebrating. So I look forward to the next time, Bill.
Thank you, Brian. Have a great rest of your evening. Dr. Brian Warren has been my guest. You can learn more about him at Brian Warren, MD, DIV. He's not only a physician and MD, but he's got his MDiv. So Brian Warren, MD, IV.com. That's our show for the day. Thank you so much for spending time with me. I've loved being with you. Have a great night, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Programming like this is made available through your support. Information available at myfaithradio.com.
But of all the considerable amount of things that grated Scrooge to his very core, would recoil him at every thought, note, or reminder, was his deep-seated, unadulterated, pure, and utter disdain for Christmas.
Merry Christmas, sir.
Merry Christmas, sir.
Bah! Humbug! Jacob Marley?
You will be visited by 3 spirits on this very eve. One of the past, one of the present, and of the future.
Perhaps I could take them all at once and have it done with. Jacob! Jacob! Help me! It was just a dream.
Scrooge, A Christmas Carol. Wherever you hear podcasts.